You've written your resume, you've written your cover letter, you've put a lot of effort into both, and you've clicked apply and sent it off. Now what? Now what do? Do you sit around and wait for a reply email? Are you sitting by the phone waiting for that call? What if it's been 2 days? What if it's been a week? What if it's been 3 weeks? What should you do? Well, in this episode, I'm going to give you my strongest recommendation that you should pick up the phone and follow up every application with a phone call. If you can do so in the way I'm going to coach you in this episode, it's going to make a significant difference to every single application that you make. I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking, James, nothing sounds worse or more intimidating or more nerve-wracking than picking up the phone and calling about a particular vacancy. I get it. It is all of those things. But if there is one thing that you can do that I think will make the biggest differences in your chances of success, it is making a well-planned and well-executed phone call to the person advertising the position. Making any old phone call won't work and certainly won't help your chances of being successful. But if you follow my steps in this particular video, I guarantee you that if you start following up each application with a phone call, you're going to significantly increase your chances of getting through to interview.
The most important thing is to be prepared. You've only got one shot to speak to this recruiter, so don't treat it casually, treat it with respect. So when you get finally through to that recruiter, make sure that you make an impression. You make an impression by knowing the role as much as you can. So you have the ad in front of you, you've read the ad, you understand the selection criteria, have a notion possibly who the company might be, and then maybe prepare 3 questions. So you're not just trying to recall that or wing it, you're prepared. So bang, 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 ask the questions and you impress the recruiter with your knowledge. You've taken the time, they should take the time.
You might be wondering why you even need to make a phone call. Well, again, let me put you in the shoes of a recruiter. Imagine that you have 100 resumes to read through over the next day for a position. Now, while those resumes are sitting there, the phone rings. And on the other end of the phone is a candidate who's called up about the position. While you're speaking to this candidate, it's pretty likely that you would find their resume and cover letter and have a look at it. And if the candidate asks some good questions and sounds prepared, it's very likely that you will fast track their application or make some notes. Importantly, while you're talking to that one candidate, you're not considering those other 99 at this point in time. And by the end of the phone call, if the candidate has done a good job, there's every chance that you've invited them in for interview. That's what we're aiming to do here. I know that it can be a real challenge to actually even find the contact details of the person advertising the role. This method is not always going to be applicable. For large organizations, they actually do make it very hard for you to get through to. However, I still recommend that you try. There's nothing wrong with calling reception or the switchboard and asking to speak to the person responsible for the vacancy. But if there is a contact name and an even better a contact number, I would really encourage you to call and follow through with what I'm going to teach you now. So the first step on how to effectively call a recruiter about a job is to do that. It is to try to make sure you know the name of the person that you are speaking to and actually expect them to answer the phone. Now that might sound like a funny thing, expecting them to answer the phone, but quite often when I pick up my phone and someone's calling me about a role, they often sound a bit startled. They're a bit surprised that I've actually answered the phone. So expect the person to answer the phone. Now, if they don't, I would encourage you to leave a clearly articulated voicemail. Something like, "Hello, my name's James Whitcomb. I'm just calling to ask some questions about the sales vacancy. Here is my number." Short, sweet, and articulate. Now, if you haven't heard back from them after a day, I would really encourage you to call again. In fact, I would encourage you to keep calling. However, I'd only ever leave one voicemail because the aim here is to catch that person while they're at the desk. But you really need to make sure that you know the name of the person you're speaking to, or if you can ask reception to be put through to that person and expect them to answer the phone. The second thing that you need to do is have the advertisement printed out in front of you and have read it several times so that it feels very familiar to you. In fact, I'd really encourage you to have everything printed out. Have your resume printed out, have your cover letter, have the advertisement all laid out in front of you. The reason being is it's very likely you're going to get nervous when you start having this conversation with the recruiter. If they ask you something and you've only got to look down, you can then pick your train of thought back up because you've spotted something on your resume, your cover letter, or the job advertisement. But the job advertisement in particular, you want to feel very familiar with because it's very likely that you might get asked some questions about why you're interested in this role. So don't just look at something once and call up. Have it printed out in front of you, highlight some important information, and work out what you're going to say. Research the company thoroughly and have those notes in front of you as well. Now, you should have done this when preparing your cover letter and probably your resume as well. So it's likely that you've already got this information, but again, you want to feel as comfortable as possible and as confident as possible. So having all of this information in front of you is great. For example, the recruiter might ask you, what are you so interested in our company for? And if you've got some information printed out in front of you there that's highlighted, you or I can simply look down and you can remember like that what you were going to say. I'd really recommend that you make the phone call. You've got to decide whether you feel like it's better to do it before or after you've applied. Most people feel more confident doing it afterwards. I think this can be a good idea because if you do get the recruiter on the phone, they can look up your application while you're speaking to them.
Have a moment to pitch yourself to the prospective hirer. Give them just 30 seconds. Don't waffle on. Give them a quick, succinct summary of why you're applying for the job and why you're suitable for the role.
The next important piece of advice is to be clear to the recruiter about which role that you're referring to. So it's very likely that the recruiter has multiple positions. Some recruiters work on 20 vacancies at any one time, and they might be 20 different positions. So make life really easy for the recruiter by stating to them up front exactly which role you're referring to. This next piece of advice is the clincher. If you can do this step well, then I guarantee that you are going to impress the recruiter. Have 2 or 3 questions prepared and written down in advance and practice them before you call. So why do we want to write these questions down? Well, again, if you speak to the recruiter on the phone, they're very likely to say, have you got any questions? Now, if you are prepared here and you ask a couple of questions that makes the recruiter sit up and take notice, then it is very likely that they are going to be impressed. So don't ask questions about anything that's on the advertisement. Don't ask about the pay. Don't ask about the hours. Ask about parts of the job that show your expertise. So if the role was working as a payroll officer, you might ask about the particular software that the organization may or may not use. By doing so, what you're probably showing the recruiter is your level of experience with the software themselves. In fact, if you can ask a recruiter a question about the role that they don't know the answer to themselves, it's very likely that they're going to think, wow, this candidate really knows what they're talking about. So the most important step in the whole process for you to really stand out is to have some questions prepared, have them written down, and ask them in a way that helps to show that you really know what you're talking about.
I think it's important for the candidate to know what they want to talk about before they call. If they call and just say, hi, I'm calling about this application without any real conviction or direction, the recruiter's going to go, I'm really, really time poor. Can we get to the point of it? I would be calling, introducing myself. I would refer to the role, and I'd have 3 or 4 key questions that I wanted to ask. So, hi James, my name is Ryan. I'm calling regarding XYZ opportunity. I was hoping I could catch you quickly to talk about these 2 elements. Have I got you at a good time?
Be prepared to keep the call brief. It is likely that the recruiter is very busy and doesn't have a long time to speak to you. They might be between interviews, they might be between meetings, but there's also the very real possibility that casual conversation turns into a semi-formal and then a formal phone interview. So you need to keep that in mind yourself. Don't call up if you've only got 3 or 4 minutes to speak in case the recruiter likes what they're hearing when they speak to you and they want to keep that conversation going further. Like everything, if you're not feeling confident with this, and you're probably not going to at the start, it's really important to practice. You can practice in front of a mirror. You can ask a friend to act as the role of the recruiter, but go through it a couple of times by yourself. The biggest challenge is actually going to be getting through to speak to the recruiter. But I really believe that if you can get through to 3 or 4 recruiters and you can apply the method that we've taught you here, you're really going to have a lot of success, and you're really going to increase your chances of getting through to the interview stage.
Keeping it concise though, I think again, it doesn't need to be sort of a 20-minute, phone conversation. It can be fairly brief, and still you can communicate quite a lot of information fairly quickly around what your background and experience has been, and see if there's alignment for the actual opportunity.
A really important thing a candidate can do when calling is to follow up with a text. Whether or not I answer, even if I have answered and we've had a good chat, follow up with a text is really important. I probably receive anywhere between 50 to 70 calls a day, inbound and outbound. I think if every one of those sent a text after we've spoke, or if they didn't catch me, just saying who they are and what the call was regarding, it just means when I see that number again, I'll instantly associate it with that text. And also when I come back to call in, if I've missed it, if I've got a text saying, oh, hi, it's Joe, I know that when I call back, I can say, hi, Joe, and know what it's about.
A call that I often get is, have you received my application? And if you've received an email to confirm that we've received your application, then yes, I have received your application. But just the generic, have you received my application? Probably won't go down too well.
So there it is, 7 simple steps that you can take to effectively recall a recruiter about a vacancy. You'll be able to download this as a checklist on your candidate coaching platform, and I really would encourage you to make the most of this opportunity. Don't be like 99% of other candidates who just send off their applications and wait to hear back. Take your destiny into your own hands. I certainly can't guarantee you that every phone call is going to lead to an interview, but what I can guarantee is that each conversation you have gives your application more exposure. And a lot of the time, you are competing with other candidates who have just as much skills and just as much experience. So the recruiter is looking for sometimes an easy way to put somebody through to the next round. If you can make a well-prepared phone call and ask good questions, you're doing yourself a huge favor and significantly increasing your chances of being successful. Good luck.